Hey there, Diagnostic Guru here. We are super excited to announce today that we are launching a line of kids' superpower capes. We believe that identifying and owning their superpower early on helps kids build confidence, make authentic decisions, and trust that what they bring to the world is inherently good. And all superheroes with superpowers get cool costumes, so capes are a must. See our banner at diagnostic-guru.com and help the little superheroes in your life find and own their superpower. You can order online now. You will find four great colors and embroider it with your child's superpower. My son chose compassion in the black and yellow, and my daughter's superpower is sixth sense in the blue and red. Empower your children with a superhero like superpower now so they can launch into their own confident universe. Well, I can't believe that we have closed on season two. I never thought that I would have a podcast, let alone finish a second season of Diagnostic Guru. And here I am again, this time going through the season two with my producer, Jess. And we are super excited just to talk about lessons learned. What are the differences between the different guests? And is there any synergies or differences recognized between season one and season two? So join out the journey with us as we go through this. And I'm excited to talk to you today, Jess, and happy Thanksgiving.
And same to you. Happy Thanksgiving. This will air the week after Thanksgiving, so we hope you all had a great holiday. Um, but this is like my favorite thing that we do is kind of like debrief all of this, and partly because I love going back and listening to all of the episodes concurrently. I feel like I get so much of the individual lessons listening to them back to back to back. It's probably why binging Netflix became a thing because you actually get the storyline better. So if you haven't listened to all of the episodes of season two while you're in the car on your schlep to wherever you're going for the holidays, coming up again, feel free to listen to them back to back to back, and see what you think. But this will be a nice precursor.
Yeah, I mean, here I was traveling this weekend from a 2 hour weekend getaway, and I listened to them back to back, and it was really exciting to, and I forgot some of the conversations and how we got started. And so let's start with the first guest, Marcy.
Absolutely. I actually know Marcy personally, so this was really fun for me to like listen to her self-reflect. But the thing that caught me is how she like jumped right in with her bad being that she's a bad manager
I
because
know.
she struggles to communicate expectations. She came back around to it in the end, but I love the self-awareness. I think that that is such a hallmark of a good leader, even if she says that that makes her a bad leader. Being able to know that about yourself, like I thought that was a perfect way to kick off season two.
I did too. And I just think also bringing her in from a different perspective from the tech industry, which is still in the sciences, but it's more of a digital modern day science, I would say, right? Because she's developing apps and supporting businesses, tech savvy businesses. And we started with the good, bad, and the ugly, which is different for
Yeah.
us. And I think it kind of set the stage differently with her for her. And it was interesting, yeah, that she had this humbleness on her limitation, but out of it, she felt that building trust was really important with her team. And it's hard to build that sometimes, but also she doesn't explain herself, right? And so sometimes instead of trying to explain to her team member or whatever to do the work, she'll just take it on herself. When at
Mhm.
the end of the day, if we just take the time to explain it, some people like to know that information, some don't. And so you just got to kind of feel them out and figure that out, down the line when you're managing different personalities.
Yeah, and I thought how she brought that back around to how she works with clients too, and why. I think Nimble, they specifically asked the client, like, what is your goal here? What is your vision? What is it that we're trying to accomplish here so that when she makes those leaps, she can tie it back to what their actual mission or vision is. I think that's actually a really important maybe workaround in the sense of how to handle that bad because she does, she's just a fast thinker and she jumps and sees a solution. And sometimes it's difficult to like take the time to slow down and articulate how I got from here to there. But if it's mission aligned or vision aligned, that makes that a lot easier, I think.
It's incredible that you just said that because that was another highlight for me because it also in the beginning, her clients' missions and visions sort of changed her company's
Uh-huh.
mission and vision because she felt she had to meet what they needed versus what the whole purpose of the business that she was building. So I think that was an interesting learning experience and somebody, like myself sitting there and listening to her and us being new business owners and starting DG and what is our mission and vision. You can really be swayed not just by your team members, but also by your clients.
Absolutely. And I thought the part that was so interesting when she first said this, when she talked about scalability, and she was like, yeah, our thought was like, if we have 10 people on our team, but those 10 people work with 10 clients, and then those
Mm.
10 clients work with their clients, that we really are touching like 10 million people. And that sounds so profound and so perfect. But then she was like, it didn't actually work that way because we may have been touching 10 million people, but we only got to experience the 10 clients we were working with. And so it didn't feel that way. I think that's such an important lesson of like, scalability is one of those issues we talk about all the time. We talk about it with you and I. I have talked about it in every business that I have worked in or run. How do you scale what it is that you do? And I think coming from like what was a very idealistic place, and a very smart place on the surface, but for her to kind of recognize like it didn't actually play out the way that we wanted it to, I think that was really interesting for me.
Again, that just shows how humble she is and honest about herself and her limitations. But when we asked her about the word failure, she almost cringed a little bit,
Not a
right?
little bit. I watched her facial expression the whole time. She was definitely full on cringy through that whole piece. And but I love that. Like as someone, I think that's one of the things we're getting at this podcast or getting to with this podcast is like there's humility that works for you, and then there's like almost fake or orchestrated humility that you've been taught. And I love how she's just like, I don't love the word failure. Like if you've tried your hardest and it just didn't work, that's not failure. That's it didn't work, right? And those are different things. And I really loved that like the example she gave of failure was the whole email piece where she was
Mm,
like, I shouldn't have like if the email was important and I should have given it the time that it deserved, or I shouldn't have done it at all. That's failure, right?
yeah.
Like that, and I think that that's such an important distinction. But it also just made me laugh really hard when she like watching her squirm at the word failure.
Well, and she even apologized a little bit. She was like, failure and goals are personal mismatches
Yep.
of her. And she also touched about on shame as well, right?
Yep.
Between your values and your actions. And I think it's a valid point. If you're not going to show up and give it your all and it does fail in the end, well, of course it did. I mean, you didn't give it your all. So you really need to recognize, what you're putting into things at the end of the day, especially when you're trying to deliver a product for a client.
Absolutely. And I will say, just kind of to wrap up her episode, the thing that I love that she left us with is kind of how AI can
Mm.
be the great equalizer for women. That she's like, women in the office are just the one that's going to go figure it out. So if AI can help you do that faster, more efficiently, like that opens the doors for everyone. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a t-shirt that actually says you can yell at an AI and it never cries, which was my favorite line from the whole episode.
Oh, that is so classic. I know, I love that too. Maybe then us women can focus on other things.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, let's move on to our second guest, Carrie Haverty. It's always fun for me, I think, to for us to be able to interview someone who's stepping into a new leadership role.
Mm.
And Carrie at the time was getting ready to take on the role of National Society of Genetic Counselors president, which is a huge role in an industry that just continues to grow. So it was really cool to kind of get her perspective on that, but also her shift from direct patient care to product.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too, I love these types of stories. They're my favorite when people, especially women, when we can pivot in our careers, because as we know, we are being forced to stay in a box, right? And so for her, I think, and she came up through the ranks like a lot of us in the genetics field and a lot of these big startup companies, and to hear about how she never saw another woman in the bathroom, at one of her companies because there was so little women working there. But I also loved that she highlighted that in order for women to have a seat at the table and to get more and more women on boards and executive levels, it's not just us women who have to back each other, it's also the men
Mhm.
that need to back us up, right? And it was that one male that took a chance on her for her to pivot in the product, and she had to Google what is product manager
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
her
and
dream job.
I wrote that down too because I really loved that she was so direct about saying like, look, if I had waited for a woman to do that, to give me that opportunity, like it wouldn't have happened
Yeah.
because there weren't women in those positions. So, I think sometimes that like our conversations can be perceived as like shitting on men, but I don't think that's what it is. I think it's the acknowledgement that men are often our biggest advocates, and can be the ones that open those doors. So I thought that was a really important story too.
Yeah, and it was personal for me too, because even in our conversation, I shared just that day, I reached out to one of my mentors about a business, question. I've had a lot of great, male mentors over the years who have the EQ and really support, changes of what I've wanted to do in my career. So I think it's important that we recognize both. And all too well as she does. I mean, for a long time, the genetic counseling, very female, right, heavy organization, but not so much anymore. And I think that's exciting that we don't need to have a sex or a gender on a role.
Right.
Anyone can do that role. So,
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think, one of the things that I really appreciated about her transition from direct patient care to product is that she did step into a much more male dominated space when she did that. And she like, blatantly said, I had no idea what I was doing, right? Like she had to Google what the role even was. But she brought with her something that is so critical, which is that direct patient care or clinic
mm,
experience, right? It's like, when she was talking about the tubes and trying to get an MA who literally has got three people deep she needs to do phlebotomy on to like hand write a 12-digit code onto the tube. She's like, no, they're never going to do this. This is never going to happen. And even if it does, it's going to be wrong. But if you haven't taken that experience, like you would never know that. It seems like an easy ask until you really understand that setup. And, as someone who made the same leap that she did from direct patient care to industry, so often I sat in a room where that was the conversation. I would listen to this like huge plan being orchestrated, and then I would raise my hand and be like, so here's the thing. Patients never go to that room. And people would be like, what? It's like, yeah, you have to understand how patient flow actually works in order to understand where your product or service fits into that flow.
yeah, exactly. She was also on the forefront of some of the, products that are out there today. And now she's again at a new company, same thing, working in a totally different disease state. But since she has that touch point of understanding the patient and the clinician and what they're going to use and how they're going to use it, then that makes the product, so much better at the end of the day.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think the point she brought up at the end, which is one that certainly like afflicts me, is the like don't let perfect get in the way of good.
Mm.
I think so often we want it to be perfect. I mean, she talks about like her kit box and how it was going to be amazing. And like the male on the team was like, oh, we'll just put them in some plastic bags. It'll be fine. And really having to embrace that like there is always a solution and that solution may not be perfect, but it can be doable. And doable is sometimes as good as we're going to get. And it's okay to go with doable.
It's such a great point because I don't know how many times either companies I've worked at or products that I've purchased. And you know me, I'm like, wow, you should see this packaging. It's so amazing. And you open it up, what an experience. And then you take the test and you're like, this has no meaning, it has no utility. Like I just wasted $500.
Well, that
You
$500 paid for the packaging that you enjoyed so much.
Yeah, exactly. And the touch, I'm like, okay, so what do I do now? So that's
Right.
really the most important piece is especially in our space in diagnostics and healthcare, that if your test doesn't have utility or doesn't drive a change or do, good for the patient, then it could look as ugly as a simple tube in a Ziploc bag
Hmm.
and it doesn't, people aren't, they're going to order your test,
Yeah.
if it has meaning. So I think that was a huge value add from her as well. And she was fresh, new in her role as president-elect. She said it's something that she didn't expect to take on. So I can't wait to see how, things are going with her down the line and what a different position for her to take on later in her career.
Absolutely. And the National Society of Genetic Counselors, I mean, There have definitely, as I'm sure is true with all, national organizations at some point, like there have definitely been some rough, bumpy times. And now I think is really one of them. I mean, we're seeing diagnostics change and the roles for genetic counselors change. And so she really is going to be at the forefront of that. And I think she's perfectly suited for it.
Yeah, no, she's definitely I feel her energy, but I also feel like her strength and courage. And she's not one to back down.
No, not at all.
Well, let's talk about Dina.
I was about to
Uh
say, speaking of another one that's not one
yeah.
to back down.
Oh my God. She just like I was like high energy after that one, blown away after our conversation.
Well, and I mean, honestly, like her story was both so inspiring and infectious, and also just about broke my heart. Like the shit that she's had to put up with to do
I
the
know.
job that she loves for free,
Yeah.
just so that she can live in the work and the place that she wants to be. Like it's so wrong on so many levels that I was like, I found myself being like simultaneously furious and sad, but also like, yeah, go, Dina. But
Seriously, yeah.
I also think it was really funny, maybe comic relief that she said that as a result, she's behaved very badly.
Yes. She's not proud of some of her moments. But and I even challenged her in a sense of like, well, you don't want that job anyways if they don't like you for who you are. I mean, who says that to me all the time, Jess?
Yes, yes.
And she's like, yeah, but sometimes I'm like, I gotta pay the mortgage.
Yeah, yeah.
And she agreed, like authentic life is the way to be. But at times you have to balance, both sides of it. And just listening to her about her glitter glasses, and I could just see her there knitting and just like she's so intelligent, like piping in and just like making a direct statement. Everybody's just like, whoa, where did that come from? But she's published several hundreds of papers. She's on very well, renowned societies, and she has a following. I mean, she's got young, right, people who want to work with her, and that's how she got into the whole sex and gender thing
Yeah.
in laboratory science, which I think is a really interesting field, and it's something I never, someone who's in it day in and day out, I never really thought about it.
I mean, the term that kept coming to mind when I was listening to her is quiet trailblazer.
Oh yeah.
I don't think she would self-identify that way necessarily, but like she really is just sort of persistently, knocking this down. And she understands that we need the publications and the data in order to be able to prove it, right? And I think that's a powerful piece of it. It's not just like I'm going to go out there and be loud and talk about gender inclusivity. I need to be able to demonstrate from a data perspective why
Mm.
this is important and why that it matters. And I think that combination of, having a cause, but also having the science and the, I don't know, the forethought to understand that you're going to need to have proof and research behind it. That's just it's a powerful combination.
No, it is. And it just shows what an amazing scientist that she is. And to back to your point, through all of that journey for her, her ugly was how she managed these
Hmm.
denials. But she found that her good is that she found her way, right? Where she is today, what she's focused on, what her mission and vision is. And she's made a really unique name for herself. And so I think that's a pretty remarkable thing that some other themes and other guests that we'll talk about later on that, even though you think you're going this path, others tell you no, or you have a bad experience, you're always sort of like, swish-tailing around it, and you end up finding where you're supposed to be, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and the other thing that she said that I just kept thinking, God, what an amazing thing to be able to say about yourself is people are comfortable with me.
Oh, I know. I wish I
Like,
could say that.
I know, me too. I was like, maybe some people are comfortable with me, but I don't think I could say that universally. And
Yeah.
to be able to confidently say that about yourself, not arrogantly, just confidently say that about yourself, and to understand the inherent power in that, so huge, so huge.
Yeah, she's still sticking with the movement. I mean, I see she's even publishing continuously on it. She runs a society, for ADLM, so I'm sure there's more to come there. Maybe she will get it changed on the requisition forms that we actually recognize not just male, female, but, gender.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, she's one where I just am like, she's gonna do something great. I don't know what it is, but. It's just
Yeah.
impossible that glitter glasses can't be, a great.
Yeah. I just love, to leave with her in the sense that it was a chance encounter
Yeah.
at a conference and we both just kind of like were drawn to each other and here we are. And that's what's been amazing about a lot of these guests that we've had on. A lot of them I've never met before.
I know. Well, what was funny for me is like you apparently bonded at this conference, but you all couldn't have two more different personalities if you tried. So I was like, I have no idea how that came together, but amen for glitter glasses and knitting.
Maybe she's my alter ego.
Maybe. Well, and then, it's kind of funny because we took a hard left then and we went to Susan, who,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, talk about like an industry powerhouse working
Oh
at
my God.
Kodak,
Yeah.
working at Illumina. I mean, working at Hewlett Packard. I was like, well, I mean, where has she not worked that's a Fortune 500 company? I mean, just her resume alone is just so overpowering. And then to take on the CEO position at Delphi, which is just a totally, different, concentrated, focused company. You can tell that she really was strategic about her career and that,
Yeah.
she and not like manipulative
No.
strategic, but
Yeah.
strategic in that when she didn't feel like she had enough skill set, she took a step back and she went and got an MBA, so that she knew how to do these pieces. And I have a lot of respect for that. I don't know that I would have done that.
Yeah, and she even took a demotion
Yeah.
in one of her roles. No, it's interesting that you say that because I don't feel like I captured that as much while I was in the moment with the conversation with her until I went back and listened to it,
Yeah.
how calculated she was on her decisions and deciphering roles. And that was even one of the things that she gave for advice.
Yeah.
I may muck this up, but it was something in a sense of like, listen, if you're not able to have autonomy or whatever, or be yourself and really bring things to the table and people are listening, then maybe that's not the place for you, right? To
Yeah.
work. Go work at a place where it is a right fit for you. And yeah, she did work at some amazing reputable company near and dear to my heart. Obviously, we talked about was Kodak because I'm a child, a grandchild, and a child of Kodak, coming up through there. And I even know that theater that she spoke about that she got on stage, pregnant and was able to give, a presentation. And I wish I harbored that moment a little bit further with her in a sense of like, I should even ask her what year was that, because Kodak was a huge male engineering company. And so I can't even imagine some of the women sitting in the audience, just the thought of her walking up on the stage.
Yeah, and I kept thinking, how did that feel for you in that moment? Like
Yeah.
her, because she talked about how she got these letters and other women came up to her and were saying like how inspiring it was. But I kept thinking like, but what were you thinking? Like, was it a big deal to you? Did you realize like what kind of, glass you were breaking at the moment, or did it seem normal for you? Like I think I would, if I could go back and ask her another question, there were so many times where I was just like, this is such a profound thing that she would say. And like you, I didn't catch it in the moment, but when I went back and I was like, God, that's a really important point. Like she talks about the hubris of believing that if you come up with something really cool technology wise, that you should just be able to sell this and make money.
Yeah.
And she was talking about how, like, through her MBA, that's the thing she really gained through going through that process is the understanding that, like, great ideas go nowhere all the time. And that you really have to have a humility when you're creating new technology that, like, there's lots of reasons, way more reasons why this won't work than why it will. And you have to be able to build the business case along with the really cool technology. And I just thought, I don't know if I caught it at that moment, but God, what an important point if you're ever going to be able to take something to market and kind of going back to the whole failure point, there's got to be a lot of times where it just doesn't work.
Oh, absolutely. And we kind of touched upon that a little bit. Like everyone thinks their next great idea is going to be the best product, but they don't think about it in theory, how it's going to work or how people are going to use it, et cetera. And I think, for her coming from the engineering, hard tech space like printers and cameras and moving over to healthcare, I think that's a really unique value
Yeah.
proposition for somebody like her being a CEO because she is bringing that sort of success and failure experience, right, of bringing a product to market and making sure that it fits the needs of for people. And so, and then working at Illumina, I mean, forget it. I mean, they pretty much own, like I said, the market share for a long time with sequencing. So I think the work that she's doing at Delphi is pretty impactful. But also for her to, I didn't realize her whole family is clinicians. She mentioned, right? And her children are
Yeah.
clinicians, and here she's an engineer. So I think it's like her life came full circle. It's almost like I should have asked her, were you running away from healthcare?
Yeah.
Um,
She said she wished she had made the transition sooner, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
I
I know.
thought, I can really see why people enjoy working with her because
Yeah.
when she talked about like, I just would focus on doing a great job. And like that sounds like so basic, but it's not, right? If you just focus on doing a great job, kill the attitude, be comfortable with where you are, I mean, I can't imagine as a teammate what a comforting presence that must be.
Mhm.
To work with someone who's like just happy to be where they are, and not that they're not ambitious or going somewhere, but they're really focused on doing a great job where they are. And they're not approaching it with attitude. They're not approaching it with arrogance. They're just trying to get something done. Like, that's the kind of teammate you really want. So I can see how she was successful at these large companies and why she's risen in the ranks.
Yeah, and the last point I want to make about her that was really resonated with me, and I wish I kind of heard this sooner. Not that I was chasing the title trail or anything like that, but like slow down.
Yeah.
Especially women, like we feel like and maybe it's because we feel like we only have enough time or the opportunities in front of us and we got to take it because it's so rare. But, just it's not about the title, it's not about the position. Like take your time and sometimes a lateral move is okay. And I think, I can't remember who, but we heard that from another guest on season one. So
Yeah.
there's some parallels there in that. And so it's obviously that's kind of how she saw her career
Hmm.
and where she wanted to go and very purposeful on each transition.
Absolutely. And I think it's funny because Desiree is the next one. And, first of all, I want to say I don't ever want to be a trauma nurse. That sounds so
Oh,
hard and so horrible. And like, I hated going to the NICU the few times that I had to do consults there, but I cannot imagine actually being there 24/7. But, I think Desiree was also one who it was very strategic in her career, making the shift from being in the clinic to being in the research space. But also really the way that she picks companies
mm.
and the way that she picks, what leadership team she wants to work for. Like I thought we really got in there with not just like where do you want to work, but like what are your criteria when you're going through picking a new place to be?
That is, I don't even know the word that comes to mind, but that's very old soul for
Mhm.
somebody to recognize that early on in their career. I mean, that's something that has to be taught or somebody showed you, or maybe it was just an innate behavior because we talked a little bit about that. A lot of it's you got to get the real world evidence experience. But she even touched upon really lightly, and that's another one I didn't dig in as much, but she almost just gave up
Yeah.
and was going to quit the industry because she didn't find right her perfect spot, her sweet spot, which she is now. She's very happy in where she's at. But it obviously, whatever it is that she learned or that she applied for her career, she taught to her children because we talk her daughter, that's another thing we talk about all the time. Her daughter's already got that first startup, generational, like, woo, got bought and, success story, which a
Yeah.
lot of us never get that. And that's pretty impressive. So she must have learned something from her mom in that aspect.
Yeah, and I had the pleasure of working with Desiree at Ariosa, which she mentioned, and working on the NIPT project. But what she didn't say, which again, this goes into the humility, is what a role she played in our huge landmark study. The next study was almost 19,000 women and
Wow.
published in the New England Journal, and she was really at the helm of that research. And it truly is what changed patient care. It was the study that proved that NIPT could be used in average risk women. And so I think when you have the opportunity to be involved in something of that magnitude that is really like changing the course of care, um, you know, I don't know where you go from that. Like I have really
Mm.
struggled with that. How do you, I mean, that was if they talk about a unicorn all the time in the startup world, like that was the unicorn. Like I don't know what is it? Not a unicorn. That was an alicorn. It had wings and a
Yeah,
the
and a
horn, right?
horn. Yeah, yeah,
And so I think for me, it was really interesting to listen to her talk about both the wisdom that she's given to her daughter, but how she herself has chosen where to go thereafter.
yeah.
Because I think when you get that experience really early on in your career, you can make the mistake of believing that it's always going to be that way. And in
Mm.
fact, it often is not that way.
No, I definitely have not had those experiences. I feel like I get excited about the new shiny toy. I don't look underneath the roof, or the hood, too much to until I get there. I'm like, oh, this is not what it's expected to be. But yeah,
Yeah.
she was very kind of quiet and shy about that. And even her daughter saying, "Oh, my mom was on that study. I
Yeah.
learned that in school," so that was pretty interesting. But I think for me, with her starting out in the like a hard clinical role,
Yeah.
but she always was interested in the technology and learning the technology and how to apply the technology. And she actually, at the end of the day, when I was talking to her and even going back and listening to our conversation, she's a scientist.
Mhm.
She
Mhm.
really is, and even geeked out, on her photos behind her. So, even though she didn't start that way as a scientist, she definitely was throughout her journey, and she is today more in the research, clinical research side.
Yeah, and I think that that really came through when she said, I'm in a field where curiosity is welcome. Like I just love that, and maybe that's the driving force for how you pick a path, right? Is go where your curiosity is welcome. If you really have that inherent spirit to ask why, like you really have to find a space where that's invited, as opposed to, where questions make problems.
Yeah, and she's another one though, very calculated on her career. She, the sweet spot of where she wants to be. But then we go into our next guest, Barbara, who lots of no's,
Yeah.
in her career. And I don't know, it's kind of similar to Dora, our first guest in season one.
Yes.
Like it could be just the cultural upbringing of where, that where they come from, very similar countries, very similar regions, women, not being supported to be in the sciences. But she too, sort of never gave up, and was able to find where she wants to be. But I think that's interesting because a lot of these women, even with Barbara that we're talking about now, but I feel like each and every one of them all kind of had the same story. They may not have highlighted it as much as Barbara, that a lot of times they were told no and they had to find a new direction, and persistence was key in order to get to where they are today. And I think that overlaps perfectly with Desiree.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like at one point, Barbara said, I was not a fighter. And
Yeah.
listening to that, I'm like, yeah, you were.
Yeah,
Like,
I
you
know. And she comes
absolutely
off
were
so
a fighter,
soft.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, she comes off very gentle as a German, very gentle and sweet, but it's like, oh, you're a fighter inside.
Yeah, she talked about her persistence, but she didn't see that as being a fighter. But I kept thinking, well, who in the hell goes from being a little kid on a dairy farm in some small town in Germany to being the COO of a major molecular testing lab? Yes, you are a fighter, right? But she also said, it looks different. And I think that's important. It's because some people aren't the type to come out swinging. And I
Mhm.
think that's kind of maybe what she was saying, that like I didn't directly fight every one of those no's. I waited until there was a no that I really disagreed with, and then I went after it with all of my might.
Mm.
And I think
Mhm.
that's different maybe than, kind of attacking each no or each person that kind of pushes you aside. And again, she's been very consistent, very strategic. But she's also talked a lot about her team and how she's really leaned into the people. And I think we heard that with Desiree. We've heard that with other guests as well, with um, with several of our previous guests, Susan, lots of people that have been in these major leadership roles. That when you lean into the people that work with you and you create these teams that trust and rely on each other, that you kind of collectively move past the no.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with that, maybe one of the no's or the challenges was she said she never practiced as an engineer.
Yeah.
And so,
So
and I did, that was interesting to me, but also learning, she's licensed lab director and got into the molecular science. She worked at Roche, which is one of the largest, biotech companies globally. But she got that on the job. training. It's not like she went and did the degrees and then took the job. It sounds like with all of her work through the years, she slowly found her path, right? And got that training. So I think that's interesting too, because I feel like today, at least from my experience, a lot of young, kids coming up through school, going to grad school, they feel like they have to check the box. Like I gotta go get my master's, and I gotta get my PhD, then I gotta get this, and I gotta do that. But sometimes, you know what? Just take a pause, go work in the field for a while and see what it's like, and then come back to it, which is pretty much what I did. But I think we need, because sometimes what happens is like, say, Dr. Chang on our season one, she did that path
Yeah.
and she didn't want to do it anymore. So I think that's interesting in Barbara that she found her way, even though she started in a different, position in life.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the thing she said about making STEM cool again,
Yeah.
we asked her like what can we do for young girls and stuff. And it seems so simple, but she's right, right? Like, I think it's a strain that we've picked up on here. It's why we created the superpower capes that, just launched last month. We're trying to make it, whatever word it is that the kids use these days, cool, fun, interesting, exciting, to bring some energy to this space for not just young girls, but for boys as well. So that it feels, I don't know, I think STEM may have taken a little bit of a hit. It feels like it can be kind of, boring. Like an engineer doesn't sound nearly as exciting as maybe it used to. But I think we've got to change that. We've got to change the perception of, science and math and, those subjects that are traditionally considered the hard subjects. I think we need to make them fun again. And so I loved that advice from her.
Yeah, I did too. That's why I was like, we need a glee for stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that, but yes.
Well, and because she said girls need to see math as cool. That's
Yeah,
obviously a challenge she has in raising two girls. And I love that she's like, girls recognizing their superpowers. And I was like, well, more to come. And here we
exactly.
are as we launch the superpower cape. So it's almost like she had a sixth sense, and seeing that that was coming on the horizon. So I can't wait for her to see that. But I think the last thing for me, which was interesting, I love her superpower, catalyst.
Catalyst.
It's such a
Yep.
cool superpower, and it's so true for her, and her persistence, got her through. And so I think that more women and young girls, and I know she does a lot of mentoring, need to see that just because, you get a lot of doors slammed in your face doesn't mean you have to give up. You just keep going through it. And who cares if no one thinks, if people are making fun of you that you're really good at math, just keep doing it.
Yeah, I really love that. That's the German in her. You can tell that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we kind of shifted gears at the end of this
Yeah.
season to talk to two nonprofit founders. And that was intentional, and it will kind of continue where we go in season three as we meet the moment of understanding that, the world we live in is changing, and there's a lot of pressure on nonprofits in particular to try to continue funding. But honestly, that pressure exists even for profits, for startups, for VCs, for everyone. The money is tight, and research funding is non-existent in some cases and being pulled. So it was a really interesting kind of shift that we made in my perspective, to talk to Megan and then to talk to Stephanie. You had told me about Megan and Worth the Wait a few times before we actually got Megan on the show. So remind me, like, how did you two get connected again, and how did you start being part of their board?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It just, a couple years ago, I was trying to build my network because they say networking is everything. I think Susan actually said that in our conversation. And so there was that organization called Chief that came out for women a few years ago. And I'm like, I'm going to try it, and see. And unfortunately, I didn't really get out of it what I thought I did. But what I did get out of it was meeting Megan.
Mm.
There's like they have like a forum where you can post where the people are looking for jobs or board members. And I was really focused on the board piece. And there was a woman who was in the program that said, oh, I have a friend who's starting a company. She's looking for board advisors. And when I read about her company and my former background, working in IVF and being a reproductive geneticist, I'm like, oh my God, this so resonates with me. And so that's how Megan and I met. And I'm one of her first board advisors. I've been working with her and Mike for about 4 years now. And it's been a really fun journey for me because it's all pro bono. I do it to support them because I didn't really realize. I mean, I did because I'm on the other side, right, doing the testing, in the lab, and dealing with, you know, the patients, but the funding piece, right? Like we're in states that fund, at least I'm in states that fund IVF for up to so many cycles, and just how that can be a stopgap. But then on top of that, the cancer, having
Yeah.
cancer, you
And
know,
at young ages too.
yes. Oh, it's hard. Some of the cases that come through, they mostly for preservation, but just to be smart like that up front is unheard of. I mean, it's still not talked about, and it should be. And I think that's really what they're bringing to the table. And so, it was really exciting to be able to talk to her because to your point, like I love that we're focusing more on the business side now in supporting the life sciences of healthcare and what are the challenges that they're up against in our current economy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I love how she talked about thinking about a 5 or 10 year plan and kind of how she, like, they didn't even think that they would have an organization in 5 years. But I love her husband's kind of edict of like, really, we shouldn't be in business. And like
Mhm.
our goal for a 5 year or 10 year plan is to work ourselves out of business because there shouldn't be a need for us anymore. Like talk about a mission driven way to operate. I mean, that is terrifying too. You've made this into your business and your income. And yes, you're doing it from a mission driven space, but to openly say, like, I'm trying to work myself out of a job, that's tough.
And think about it when we first started the organization, and here she had a corporate marketing job. I'm sure she's doing very well. And then of course her mom, she could have taken on her mom's business. And she completely was like, no, I'm not going to take a paycheck for a little while. I'm going to start this business. And that I remember it was like the second year we had a board meeting and they came to us. They're like, do you think Megan should be getting paid? And we're like, yeah, of course she should be getting paid because then she can put more time and effort into it and focus on it because it's really hard, especially, us knowing like starting a new business, you're paying from the first business, right? And so a nonprofit, it's not as easy. And thankfully she is able to do that. But I loved that she said competitors
Yeah.
nonprofit where I was like, wow, maybe I really like I love that camaraderie
Yeah.
and support, in the nonprofit space. Because if it was competitive, then we wouldn't have organizations like that.
100% agree. And I think we heard some echoes of that with Stephanie, our last guest, too. When, you mentioned she talked about like she was paying for the first organization with her full-time job. And I think that might be some of what breeds that collaborative spirit is just the like understanding of what it's like in the trenches when you're trying to actually fund and fuel really good, important work. Or at least I hope that's what's fueling it, is that people recognize like this is really hard to do and we're not competing against each other. Like, yes, we're competing for maybe the same money or for a pot of money or for donors or for whatever. But if we don't help each other, none of us are going to survive. And I think that's a really different mentality maybe than in the corporate space.
Oh, absolutely. And I can't imagine the brain shift it takes. That's something I would love to. I wish I thought of to dig in on for somebody like where you're in the corporate space, because we did talk a little about that, the toxicity, and then how to go into this more nonprofit giving, environment. And I mean, the stress is different for sure because you're running your own business, but it's a more positive stress, I would say.
Yeah.
But the one thing that really stuck with me the most, I'm sure it did with you, that her ugly is working with her husband.
I was not prepared for that. I truly can say when I was editing the episode, I was like, okay. But I get it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I love my husband dearly, but if we went from the two careers that we have to all of a sudden working together, and Lord knows if he had any input on where I spent the money, we would definitely be fighting nonstop. So I love that she owns that because I do
Yeah.
think that there are, not just spousal relationships, but I do think there are lots of, sisters working together or families working together,
Mhm.
and even friends working together, where the relationship aspect of it is something that you have to protect and cultivate almost separately from the business aspect of it. But when those two things overlap, it can get tricky.
It can, and I feel that's, a lot of people have different personalities at work than they do at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'd be shocked, right? So I thought that was really funny. And he even told her, like, just say it's me. Pretty much, I'm a pain in the.
Listen, I'm just glad he gave her permission. We
I
just
know, I know, because she was so sweet about it, but she was very like frank about it. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
but
let's talk about our last guest,
yeah,
Stephanie SB. This is just like we have been kind of socially stalking Stephanie for a while, hoping we could get her on the show.
and we
Because,
did,
yeah, we
yay!
did, yeah. But we just love the STEM Gems book that she put out. It's such an amazing publication and just the idea behind it, I think the thing that struck me most about when she talked about kind of the process behind the book is how
Oh,
she intentionally went after women with kind of normal jobs. And by normal, meaning like they had titles no one had ever heard of before, right? I mean, even when you were doing your video, you were like, I don't even know how to pronounce this.
I had to use AI to pronounce that word. I was like, what?
Yeah. But she's so right about representation, not just from a diversity perspective of, colors and races and socioeconomic statuses, but also the representation across the stems for job titles that actually exist in the real world.
Mm.
It wasn't just a book about like, do you want to be an astronaut or do you want to be an engineer? It was like, do you want to be roboticist, like a real actual title in a company. And I think that really makes a difference.
It does too. And the book is really beautiful. I love that she went and raised money to pay the money to make it look and feel a certain way because if it was black and white, it would lose the full effect of it.
Yeah.
And I love that each one of these women are different gems based on their titles or their roles, which is such a cool concept. And yeah, there was a post that she had on LinkedIn one day, and I remember I shared it with you. I was like, oh my God, I want to have this woman on Diagnostic Guru. Everything she does like resonates with me to the point where I'm actually looking into trying to I'm gonna, go to my daughter's school and see about doing her program at the school. But I think too, though, for me, that was really interesting in meeting her and learning from her is that she actually had a very unique upbringing, which is something that I'm actually a little bit jealous about.
Yeah.
She knew she had that science. She obviously was wired as an engineer, as a scientist, not just by epigenetics and imprinting by her parents, but it's just who she became as an individual. Um, and to have that experience. But what's so cool about her is that she recognizes that, and she really wanted to make sure it was really important that she didn't want people to be like, well, look at me. I had these parents and this is why I'm so great. But, I recognize women who didn't have that experience, and these are the women in the book. And then, therefore, I built these programs for young girls who don't have that exposure. So they too can see that, get into the sciences, and this is how you do it and how you can get exposed to it. So I think having somebody like her cheerleading, as I called her, for other young girls who don't have the access is really, really important.
I couldn't agree more with that. And I think one of the things that she even talked about was, excuse me, how STEM is not a privilege, it's a mindset. Like she
Mm,
really
I
wants to
love that. That's a
break the,
t-shirt.
yes, it is a t-shirt, right? She really wants to break that mentality that like only the kids who have come from privilege can be in STEM, that it's a mindset. It's, the way that you approach those subjects and the way that you approach yourself. And I think that's almost more than anything else for me, it was like a hugely powerful message that she's putting out through her programs, but also through this book.
Yeah, and just the whole same thing. Here we are closing on season two, and we're working on season three, which is going to be more in the finance, tech, and healthcare, merging the two worlds, which we've kind of done a little bit. But I think it's a perfect way to end. Here we are on the holidays, merging in from Megan and her business and Stephanie's business with how there's just no funding out there. She bootstraps this business. I mean, she writes grants, she does crowdsourcing, she does friends and family. Like, it's amazing that she's been able to establish this business and hold it as long as she had, especially in the economy today. And so, I think that's something that we really need to dig in and hone in on and touch upon because if we don't continue to support these types of programs, we're going to lose science. We're already behind in the
Yeah.
US in sciences in general, right? So we need to continue to figure out how we can support such programs.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're all about at Diagnostic Guru is creating the ecosystem that we want to operate in. And I
Mm,
think the ecosystem we want to operate in here is one that really supports these types of businesses, not just businesses that are run by women, although those are the ones that we typically feature, but businesses that are really doing the right thing the right way. And if we can continue to, not only bring some attention and awareness to those organizations, but also to the people that are running them and the
hmm
people that are leading them, and what they believe and how they operate and the types of lessons that, they're bringing to the table. My hope is that we are creating a community where we can be supportive of these businesses so they can continue to do the work that is really invaluable for our daughters, for our kids, but also, for the people that we love and care about too.
That's so true. And I think that's a perfect way for us to close here because Diagnostic Guru started on a different premise and it's blossomed to something bigger than what it is. And it's been such an amazing journey with you and all of the guests. And I'm excited for more things to come. But yeah, it's really about supporting the right people and the right concepts and the right beliefs. We're all in this together, so we might as well support one another. And I want to thank all the guests for joining us for season two. We haven't gotten to know yet.
That's right.
So that's a good thing. We're 100% it's statistics on showing up. And we look forward for everyone to hear season three in the coming year and look out for our superpower capes for kids.